And good evening, Gary.
Yeah. So just before we come on, what was that about LIGO again?
The gravity wave detector.
Yeah, that's right. Remind me.
Well, it's claimed to be a demonstration that they've been able to actually detect gravity waves. And I mean, I can't see how anybody cannot see the absurdity of such a claim. They're claiming that they are detecting something that has a dimension, I think they talk about 1,000th the diameter of a proton, coming from somewhere billions of light years away. You know, not a few miles, billions of light years away. They're detecting something that's of the order of the size of 1,000th of the diameter of a proton, and yet somehow or another that detector isn't getting shaken off its foundations by the gravity of the moon.
And that's where they put the whole thing underground, haven't they? Lasers underground.
It's actually above ground. It's a pipeline above ground that's supposedly perfectly flat for 4 kilometres. Because they shine a laser beam along the length of it. But, I mean, the moon somehow or another attracts billions of tons of water towards it, but it doesn't affect a device that is detecting something of the order, like I said, of 1,000th the diameter of a proton. It doesn't make any sense. It's an absolute absurdity. So it's a false demonstration. It's where they're trying to go away from. It's trying to create a mental, trying to create an idea of what they're talking about by claiming to show. And this is where I think we were talking about that before, the difference between show and demonstrate.
Yeah.
And they're claiming that they're demonstrating something.
Right.
When actually they're putting on a show.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly correct. Yeah, and I mean, for me, it gets back to the point again about how can all these people working in that field actually believe that what they're doing is what they say they're doing, and that I think gets back to this whole idea of what is it they think they're measuring, what is it they think they're quantifying, and how are they going about this quantification and measurement of these gravitational waves, which they obviously believe to be real. Yeah. All the people working at it, none of them are out to deceive us, right? But they've been taught and learned this concept of being able to quantify and measure things using invisible stuffsies or using visible stuffsies, right? And that's where we get back to the big difference between a mathematical mental model, which they're trying to quantify and measure and prove using instruments, or coming back down the chain, looking at visibles and giving them proofs, but completely ignoring the physical reality of the place, right? That is absolute nonsense what they're saying, yeah, and it contradicts our lived life. So, yeah, and again, why does it happen? I think at fault is mathematical physics and the definitions of going about quantification and measurement, because they all believe in these instruments, these methods, these mathematical equations. So, you know, none of them are out to fool us. They're just heavily invested in it, and believe that what they're doing is actually measuring something. Yeah.
That's what worries me a little bit. How can somebody like me seem to be able to think about it in a common sense way and look at what is obviously an absurdity? Like I said, the difference between the moon's gravity, which would be massive.
Yeah.
I mean, it would totally overwhelm that detector if it's as supposedly as sensitive as they claim it to be. And somehow with all that gravity, even the gravity of the sun involved, and the other planets, all the other gravities that are supposedly surrounding us, but somehow or another, that gravity from two colliding or merging black holes 2 billion light years ago, or billions of light years ago, somehow or another gets through.
Yeah, we can see a ripple in the water and we know what caused it. Yeah, it's like, you know, it's like something absurd as that, whereas you've got a whole bunch of people splashing about in the water locally and you're trying to say, see that ripple? That came from away around the corner from that boat in the island. You know, it just seems like absolutely preposterous that they can get away with that. But again, that's the power of mathematical physics, which I think is yeah, the new God, the new religion when it comes to empirical evidence, right? And I think that needs to be shown for what it is. Lacking.
What passes for science today is truly scientism. It is a religion. Yeah. There's no doubt about that in my mind whatsoever. It's you adhere to the dogma, or you're out on your ear.
Yep, you get no funding. Nobody listens to you. Your peers ignore you. Oh, what a shame. Oh, horrible.
Actually, that Peter Reid stuff is brilliant, the way he pulls the peer review system to pieces, shows it for what it is, a boys' club.
Yep, buddy review. Yeah.
Buddy review. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I hope to see a bit more from him.
But on that note, so there was one thing that we thought we could do. I'm just going to share my screen. Can you see that?
QED.
QED. QUOD ERAT DEMONSTRANDUM.
Is that Russian?
It's a translation from the Greek into Latin, and then from Latin into English. And basically, people use it at the end of a chain of arguments to say that they have delivered what was asked of them. You know, if I asked you to demonstrate something, then I would say it at the end, you know, QED, haha, I demonstrated it to you. And I suppose it's sorry, on you go.
If I made a claim about something, you'd insist that I demonstrate it. And once I've demonstrated it, I say that at the end.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a few variations to it. QUOD ERAT faciendum is what you do when you've, you know, solved a problem, which is built on multiple propositions. So you do the problem. So there's a few of those kind of Latin phrases. I don't know them all. This is the most famous one, which I remember from my studies as well, getting told QED, or at the end of a mathematical proof, you would put QED. To show that you've whatever shown the contradiction that you wanted to show, or whatever chain of argument you were using.
Well, that's an incorrect use of it then, if it's at the end of a mathematical proof, isn't it?
Exactly. Well, let's just dive right into that, because maybe this will show how this is kind of morphed over time. So the question, yeah, let me just step through some of the background context. So it's apparently a translation into the Latin from the Greek. I don't know how to pronounce this, so I won't bother. But as far as I'm concerned, in the old days, it was what was to be demonstrated was its original use. You know, if you look back to Euclidean, to Aristotle, Archimedes, they would have used QED, and they would have done a demonstration of something, like using, you know, real matter, real substance, real stuff. And they would have done a practical exhibition and an explanation of it using those substances. So I would contend that the original meaning of this word, to demonstrate something, would have involved physical objects. And probably, you know, if you were to say to me, or if I were to say to you, Glenn, I can levitate, then the first thing you would say is, you're a fucking liar, show me, right? Do it. Yeah, do it right in front of me. So in a way, it would be, you know, me demonstrating it and you being able to observe it. And, you know, the idea being that you can also then repeat it yourself, right? So that there's no need for, how should I say, belief, or for you to take it on my authority that it's possible. If I can practically demonstrate something to you, then you must have the capability afterwards, if you have the time and the effort, obviously, to do it yourself. And that, for me, would have been the original use of the word demonstrandum, to demonstrate something.
What about the instance where there obviously are magicians now who claim to be able to levitate or levitate objects or other people, and they have a demonstration?
Yeah,
And
well, I
if
mean, well, we know that's physical trickery, right? Leading to a kind of optical illusion. Yeah. You
right,
know, they'll have a pole stuck up their arse, right? Even though, you know, there isn't, there's not, so you can't see one, put it that way, because
right.
it's shrouded. So, or the, you know, or camera tricks. So yeah, I understand what you're saying, but you know, just looking at it from a historical context, you know, if you know, somebody, let's say Archimedes, was proving his buoyancy principle, then yes, he would make a practical demonstration, right? You know, for example, use a Cartesian diver to show me, you know, the principles of certain things, and I could go away and get the same equipment, the same substance like water, the same objects, and do it myself, right? So
Okay, what about the instance where Ptolemy is making claims about his structure of the universe? He can't demonstrate that, can he?
I wouldn't have said so. I would have said that's an object of thought again. He's, you know, mental objects, you know, sure, he's got a
Yeah,
model, if you like, that he's using to explain, but he's got no way to practically demonstrate it, you know.
yeah. So there is no demonstration available for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny to see that how this quod erat demonstrandum also has multiple meanings. So apparently one of the other translations of this original Greek into Latin would not necessarily be what was to be demonstrated, but it would be what was to be shown or what was to be proven. And in that different translation, I can already see, at least my opinion, the move from going away from the practical exhibition and explanation using substances into, you know, being given a show, right? And maybe a
Right.
visible show in some respects, right? So visible proofs is now being used instead of being able to have a practical, yeah, substantial demonstration.
So in effect, what I was just mentioning about Ptolemy would be a visible object because it's something that you can, well, that they could observe. They could observe supposedly the planets and everything, and he came up with his so-called model.
Yep.
But it's still done. It's still done as a QED, but rather than it actually being demonstrandum, it's being shown or proved.
Exactly. So this this phrase "quod erat demonstrandum" is not only used then anymore for, you know, show me in a physical demonstration, but it's enough now if you can show something visible, or you can put down some mathematical equations on a bit of paper. That now also counts as a demonstration, as a QED. So yeah, I agree that there's a kind of warping of the original meaning
Yep.
into visible proofs or into mathematical physical proofs.
Yep.
So, you know, when I think of the word proof, then it always has to do with a chain of arguments, you know, probably logical, either philosophical or mathematical, which will take you through a chain of steps and arrive at a conclusion, maybe based on a syllogism or you know, a certain method. But at the end of the day, it's a kind of mathematical chain of reasoning that's been done if you give a proof. So now all of a sudden we don't have to use substances anymore or do a practical exhibition. It's enough to point to the sky, right, and then to come up with a kind of model or mathematical chain of thought that will, and they still put QED at the end of that, yeah.
Yep.
And to be
Actually,
honest,
a phrase. Go on.
no, you go.
I was just going to say a phrase that comes to mind for me is maths is reality.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, that's maybe this should actually be more on this last bit, because it really is a mental object as well. it kind of belongs in both camps here.
Yep.
But what happens, or even what I learned during my studies was this further morphing to the end. The mathematicians used to joke about it. Instead of putting QED at the bottom of a mathematical proof, they would put W to the power 5, which was what was wanted, right? And it was a kind of
5W.
the 5 W's, yeah. And it was a kind of a bit of it was a kind of mathematical insider joke, when you heard that, you thought you were really clever, right? Because it was W to the power 5, and I remember us all sniggering in the class thinking, oh, that's, aren't we smart because we understand that? And when you look at those words now, though, you see that what was wanted, it's more to do with what has been desired or what has been intended. And if you then start to look at what it means to do something, to build a mathematical instrument, whether a real instrument or whether a mathematical process, then it's all about looking at what is it you're trying to prove, and then building a language or a method or axioms or propositions that will allow you to get to that desired result. So it's morphed away from fucking show me, you bastards, what's practically possible, to okay, I can explain some pictures and give you some equations, to just being equations that depend on a mathematical process of bringing about the desired conclusion and explaining it based on a language that you then invent. When I say invent, I mean you at least invent the axioms that go around it. So
yeah. Well, actually, if you do think of scientism or science as a religion, you can see that could be the case, that they want to create the mentals by manufacturing what are essentially false demonstrations.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're shows, they're mathematical proofs, but they're trying to make them, they're trying to call them by making them a QED, by putting QED at the end of those sort of things. They're trying to force their desired, intended idea into your mind by use of false demonstrations.
Yep, false equivalencies, demonstrations, basically just, that they are logical mistakes because they're in no way reflecting what it is that they're claiming and what we are challenging. It's definitely, how should I say, sophistry at the end of the day. And I think the way, just looking at my question is then, has the meaning of QED changed over time? And I would think very much that it has, right? It's definitely more from, let's say, 500 years ago, where all these mathematical concepts and cosmologies nowadays, were at least not, how should I say, accessible to people, where if I wanted to prove something to you, then I had to do it rationally with substances using Euclidean geometry, and I could demonstrate it to you. And it's morphed now all the way into just requiring a mathematical proof, which was what was wanted,
Yeah. So what we should do is, rather than demand proof or saying prove it or saying show me, we should be asking for a demonstration.
Yeah,
for
a physical, practical demonstration. Yeah.
Yep.
And that's what they can't deliver, right? Because we know that a mathematical object is just a mental, like a sphere. It's a mental mathematical object. Yes, you can represent it on a bit of paper, and people can then, look at it. So in a way, there's, the ability to see it in the sensible column here as well. But at the end of the day, it's just purely a mental object. And that's why they can't show the curvature of the Earth, because there's nothing physical about it.
No. Everything that they've put forward that they've claimed is a demonstration that we live on a sphere is not a demonstration.
Yep.
None of them.
None of them. No, that's the way I see it too.
And it like show me actually fits in perfectly well. It's like all we've seen, all the stuff that most people will come back with is they've been to space. They've shown us. We've seen it.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, they have shown you. You've seen a movie show. They've created it. They haven't demonstrated anything.
Exactly. All they've done is shown, you know, and it's quite interesting to see that, you know, depending on the translation or your interpretation of this, you know, Latin or Greek, right, then it's now morphed into being acceptable to put on a show or
Yeah.
to provide a mathematical proof. But nobody's talking anymore about the practical demonstration that we should have had. Yeah. So yeah, I just thought it was how should I say, typical, and it might just help people see how mathematics is just a formal language. We are just talking about the interpretation and the meaning of words here, and
Yeah.
how it's just been, you know, evolved over time or changed over time, whether deliberately or not. It is the way it is. We're at that stage now where that's all you need. Show me a model, show me some equations, but hey, I don't need to demonstrate anything to you. Fuck off. That's not the way. That's not the way it works. You know.
No,
So
definitely not.
yeah, and maybe that's just a very short video we can put out. Might help people think more about what they should take as the, you know, the bar of believing something, yeah, or of the difference between belief and knowing. I think you know something if you have a physical demonstration that you can do yourself, and you just have to believe something if somebody's giving you a proof and you don't understand the mathematical sophistry behind it. So yeah, people should think very carefully about what the bar is and evidence for the globe. Huh?
I still have a bit of an issue with the difference between belief and proof, belief and knowing.
Yep, we should maybe take that up for another wee video. I'm just going to stop this one here, Glenn, just to keep it nice and short.